Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by JP Mason, just as I switch the volume down on the TV, and Brian Degnan for the ACSOM Bulletin. It's Thursday. JP, number 5 over your shoulder. That was way up at 120. That is the number of days we have before our Champions League qualifier. I understand you watched the game when you got home from your work last night. Where are we with this at this moment in time? Do you feel dreadfully underprepared? Do you feel as though we have given Ange Postecoglou an impossible task against Midtjylland?
I don't know if it's mission impossible, but it's certainly mission difficult. Probably mission very difficult, because I've not seen much of Midtjylland, but by all accounts, a guy at my work says they were always very good for a win on his coupon. So that's one thing. And I think they've had some pretty good results in Europe as well over the last few seasons and taken some scalps. So, you know, the old saying, the old adage, they're no mugs. And unfortunately, we're in one of the strangest positions I think we've ever been in. You know, people can joke about going into Champions League qualifiers with Beaton and Welsh or Beaton and whoever at centre half. I mean, the areas of right round the pitch are all full of inexperienced players. It's just, and with the injuries potentially last night, you know, I mean, you wouldn't even say Karamoko Dembele was like a first team squad member, but he was probably somebody that was coming into the thinking for next week, which is mental considering what age he is and how little experience he's got. But now he's injured as well. Terrible tackle from behind by that Bristol City player. Really unnecessary, I would have thought, in a friendly. I think that was emphasised to him after the fact by other Celtic players, quite rightly so. But yeah, I think it's just, we were talking off air there as well. It's just like you can see that there's signs of the players looking to execute what he's trying to get them to do, but we just don't have that personnel on hand to do so. We're so hamstrung with everything really that's happened, and there's uncertainty over the players that are maybe going to go. That can't be good for the camp as well. You've got guys half in, half out. So it's just an absolute cluster. And I'll not repeat the last part of the saying because it's a family show, but
it is a family show, yes.
Insert a 4-letter word after cluster and you'll get what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. It's a family show which goes out now to various areas of the globe, none more so at the moment than Australia. We've got loads of interest from our Australian friends, so thanks for tuning in. Obviously, we have Ange Postecoglou, and that's one of the biggest reasons. We're going to deconstruct where we are bit by bit today, because I do feel that, you know, we obviously, Brian, put all our eggs, it felt, in the Eddie Howe basket. He obviously did one, and in many ways left Celtic in an unenviable position. We had been working in the background on Ange Postecoglou, according to the club, and we were able to get that particular deal done pretty quickly when it was required. But we've simply not given him the tools to get through this game. I don't think it would have ever been comfortable, to be honest with you. But what I was saying just before we came on live is, if you rewind a year ago and you're sitting here with the team Neil Lennon had at his disposal, with the transfers coming in, he has far more riches, and I don't mean in a financial sense, than what Ange does at the moment. You look at the 3 games that we've played in pre-season, the amount of youth that we've had to rely upon. Like JP says, Karamoko Dembele barely got a sniff last season, right? So particularly under Neil Lennon, barely got a sniff. I think he came in for the infamous games following the Dubai debacle with everybody being in isolation. But he didn't get a sniff until Kennedy comes in. Now you're kind of looking at him, due to the situation with Jamesy Forrest, as a potential starter against Midtjylland. JP says he's hamstrung. I think half the players have got hamstring injuries after last night. In terms of that, I've got to say I do have a degree of sympathy for Ange Postecoglou going into this game.
Absolutely. I think the positives we've seen is that the players are sort of buying in. You can see a system, you can see the ideas are in place, but it just doesn't have the quality in the key areas is the problem. Now, I've got to say, this is the first time I've actually been on the pod with JP, and I've watched from afar as the countdown's been growing. It reminds me of that film, The Ring. Remember when you watch the videotape and you've got 7 days before you die? I just feel like there's 5 days and something absolutely terrible happens. And I can't help but think, I've been trying to be as positive as I can about the transfers and saying, well, there's mitigating circumstances. You get, the pandemic, you kind of just get a player in. But at some point, they have to say, this has been a long time coming. It's not quite snuck up. I mean, they could have been watching this podcast and saw the countdown and be more aware of it. So I agree with you. I've got complete sympathy with Ange because you can see he's doing his best. And I think, I know we can't read too much into pre-season, but I actually think that it's been better than I would have expected, given the lack of depth, given the amount of youth in the squad. Mm-hmm. So, look, I don't think we're going to get our pants pulled down against Midtjylland, but I do think that it's going to be, if we pull off a result, it's going to be, amazing. My only worry about that is if we pull off the result, they would then sit back and say, do you know what, if we can beat Midtjylland, we're actually not doing too bad. That is maybe more of a concern for me than actually the result.
The false sense of security that it might provide, and in particular the board, to suggest that, well, actually we might just run with young Dane Murray at centre-half, who, by the way, has impressed in the games pre-season. We will talk about the youth, JP, as we go through the show, because I do believe that when a clutch of young guys come into the team like that, listen, I would love for them all to make the grade at Celtic and to carve out careers at Celtic Park. But we know that's not going to happen. But we will have a look at that to see which ones you've been impressed with and who you think might come through and play a big part this season and in seasons after. One thing I would say, though, is one of the players that I was looking at last night, and I was thinking to myself, he was a wee bit older than I expected, was Ewan Henderson, who's now 21. But if we use almost like the breakthrough game that he had last season as an example, where we've gone into a game against Lille, who ended up French champions, right? And we beat them 3-2. And you'll remember Henderson having to come on, I think, after 20 or 30 minutes because Frimpong was injured at right back. Even then, it showed you how wafer thin our options were at right back, because we were having to bring someone else on to play like a kind of a wide role in his place. But he played very well that night, didn't he? And that particular game, though, that was when we probably didn't expect to get anything out of it. We threw a couple of guys in who didn't have a great deal of experience in the Celtic team, JP, and it was almost as if they played without fear and ended up playing a really, really good side to the death, and we beat them. Now, sometimes when you're putting players in that aren't first-team regulars, they do play without that kind of level of fear. There's a wee bit of innocence about them, but sometimes they can play and there's a bit of flair and there's a naivety about them, but it works in their favour. Maybe I'm clutching at straws here. Do you think that is something that might happen with some of the young guys that will be forced to play against Midtjylland now? We're talking about Dembele. If he's injured and Forrest is out, I mean, we might have to play the new guy sooner than we would have expected. To be honest with you, you're talking about red tape, etc. Is that even possible for us to play our new signing? He's just in the door. He's 19 years of age. He's an Israeli internationalist who is creative, and his assists and goal scoring record is fantastic. He was unveiled yesterday. Of course, it's Leo Abada. I mean, are we getting to the stage where we're throwing somebody into a big game like this?
It's like back to do you remember when Jackie McNamara made his debut and he basically signed? Did he not sign on the day and then he played that night?
He wore someone else's boots, I think. Is that right?
I had to get a loan after the boots to play a game. It was either I think it might have been at Brockville, if I remember rightly. That's going back some time. But yeah, it's kind of like that. It's flying by the seat of your pants, just players signing and then barely trained with their teammates and getting thrown into games. And it's the same with the young guys as well. Like, I mean, the only thing that concerns you with that is it's sink or swim, isn't it? Because these guys come in, they all come in at the same time, and they've not got the support of a lot of seasoned players around about them. There's a few, yes, But even Turnbull's still relatively new as a Celtic player. It's not as if he's had 3-4 seasons of playing at Celtic under his belt. Callum McGregor's really probably the only one. Greg Taylor's only been there a season. And I just think when they all come in, there's a clutch of them all come in at the same time. That the onus is all on them to perform, and if they don't perform, then hopefully they don't get discarded or anything like that, because it's not fair on them. They're young guys; they've got no experience at this level. I mean, this is Champions League qualification. It's not the first round of the League Cup or the Scottish Cup or something like that. This is high stakes, and we're gambling with potentially these guys at this level. So
it goes back. I mean, like Brian said, you've been counting it down, and it's incredible that we're sitting here with just 5 days to go. But when Ange Postecoglou was announced as Celtic manager, there's an element of risk in every managerial appointment, and we get that. But at the time, I called it a 60 million quid gamble, and I was referring to this season's Champions League campaign and being prepared for the qualifying games. But I was also talking about, obviously, this season's domestic campaign and the necessity to win the league, to have that automatic qualification into the group stages of the following Champions League campaign. So it's probably not even 60 million. You could probably say it was 80 million, when you look at 2 qualifying campaigns, and we really are gambling on it. Had we gone into it with everybody fit and everybody firing on all cylinders and a couple of new faces in the door, it would still be a challenge, and we don't have the luxury of all of that. When you said Jackie just a few moments ago, JP, the first name that came to my mind was Jackie Jakanowski. Now, Jackie Jakanowski, as we know, and as we mentioned last night to young Ben, who was 13 years of age, who joined us to give us an insight on Bristol City, it was way before his time, and it really is in Celtic Da territory. But forgive me or humour me while I talk about Jakanowski. So yes, a player who played with both sides, who obviously were on show last night. Let's have a chat about the game first and foremost, and then we'll start working through some of the concerns, and let's try and talk about some of the positives as well that we have at the club, if we can. I've got a couple highlighted here, I promise. So last night's game, JP, you watched it when you came in. Brian and I were on the post-match. We had a good chat about it for half an hour last night. Overall, a bit of a damp squib, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was more what the sort of fare you expect in a pre-season friendly than the previous two. I think we were maybe spoiled with the play and the goals in the previous 2 games, whereas last night was just it was just a bit stop-start. The injuries didn't help, interrupted the kind of flow of, which, to be fair, the first 15-20 minutes they did look, I liked the way they were passing the ball about. Everybody knew their positions, and there was a bit of a zip to it, but then it just started to get a bit bogged down, and things got a bit wayward. I think the manager would probably just say it's just a game. Well, he did say at the end, he said it's just about getting fitness up, and the opposition didn't really matter. It was more just about that. You would like to have seen, maybe Ayeti keeping his goal scoring run going just for his own confidence, because obviously he's not had the best start to his Celtic career, and he'll have enjoyed the fact that he scored in the last 2 games, and I'm sure he would have wanted to keep that up last night. But these games are probably just about fitness. I liked what I saw. I think there's positive signs in the young players. I think Hjeld, heard a lot about him over the last year and a half, and people saying good things about him, but I've not seen anything really of him until now. And he looks, what age is he? 18?
17.
17.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks like he could, another couple of years, he looks like he could be a pretty decent unit at the back. He's got good awareness in the ball and good touch. So, there's probably a reason why people have been speaking positively about him, like John Hughes at Ross County and whatnot. So, like the look at him. I think the guy Murray that you were mentioning as well looks decent. You'd like to think that they would be, though. I mean, why wouldn't they be? We're Celtic. We should have a really good, youth development coming through, because at the end of the day, when right at the base level, when these kids are really young, we should be getting the best of those kids at that age,
Absolutely.
and then they should be becoming the best at their age later on down the line, providing they
100%.
stick to the path, So.
100%. And also, if you think about it, Celtic's domination of Scottish football, which lasted for 9 seasons in a row, during that period from 2012 right up until, I would say, last season, Celtic surely would have had the pick of the bunch. Previous to that, JP, there's an argument to say that, Celtic and Rangers are vying for every top talent in Scottish football. I think a lot of parents got wise to the fact that if you signed for a Hibs or a Dundee United, or even for a spell Falkirk, they were being renowned for bringing in youth players, giving them first team experience. Yeah, it was a clearer path. But I think Celtic, for a period there, should have had the pick of the best talent in Scottish football, Brian. Whether or not the batch that we're seeing coming through were part of that era, I don't know, or maybe it'll be a wee bit later on that we start seeing some of those guys coming through. But the players that JP's mentioned, let's have a wee chat about some of them then. Dane Murray, for example, he's been at Celtic since he was 6. He's only 18. He's in line for a testimonial. He's only 18. Been at the club since he was 6-year-old. I think he looks composed. I think he looks really, they're playing with, as I say, this freedom where they're kind of fearless. It's not as though you've just paid £5 million or £7 million in Julian's case for a new centre half, and there's that element of pressure. I'm not saying there's no pressure, but they do seem to play with older heads on their shoulders. Leo Held, I love the look of him. I think that he obviously comes from good stock. His old man played with Nottingham Forest under at the same time, rather, as Pierre Van Hooijdonk. So he played alongside Van Hooijdonk at Nottingham Forest. Leo Held comes through, gets his loan deal to Ross County, shows up really well. John Hughes was raving about him, even comparing him to Virgil van Dijk. And then, before you know it, Leeds United are interested. Now, I've got a slight concern about Leo Held, though, because we've got to ensure that we continue with that development. What is the best way to continue with that development? Because obviously you could say, well, he's going to be part and parcel of the first team squad during this season. Do you think he is? If not, then he needs to get loaned out at a decent level to ensure that development continues.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things I've spoken about before is I think Celtic need to have a layered approach. So in your top level, we've got an experienced starting 11, and just underneath that is a sort of youth starting 11. And what you can do throughout the season is start to filter that in. So there's no reason, if you could say Starfelt is your star man, Dane Murray could play next to him for a game against, whoever, well, I was going to come out there in the SPL minute, but you know what I mean? I sort of
thank God. No offence, Kilmarnock fans, but
yeah, no luck. But you can start to filter these players through. It's one of those. It's the contradiction with Celtic having an academy, isn't it? Because you want these players coming through, but a lot of the time you're unwilling to take the risk and play a younger player. So how did they develop to that point? The famous one was with also James McCarthy at Hamilton. I think he played 100 games by the time he was 18. Now, if he'd been at, say, Celtic's youth development, would he have became the player he was? You don't know. So there has to be a sort of, if we're committing to, it's going back to that argument about vision, if we're committing to the Celtic under $60 million man Ange, is we're going to look at the academy and filter them through over the course of the season, then we're going to have to accept that there's games where Moffat will be a star man on the right wing, and you're going to make mistakes, but we have to persevere to create a better player.
Yes.
Or we're going to stick, we have to get an experienced 11 in, we have to win the league, we have to do this, we do that, in which case you're unlikely to develop your youth players. So if you look at them as part of the coach setup, I think that's good for their development because it will make them a bit physically stronger, dealing with, part-timers, kicking them up and down in the air. That's good for their development as people and as characters. But what I would always question is, Dane Murray, we're talking about, he's definitely going into the Colts. But then we're saying a guy, Yuri Gideon, we're saying, he could probably play first team. There's only a year between them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is the distinction there? Why are we signing guys and that guy's for the Colts? Is it because he came through the academy and we don't trust him? Because I think, for what I've seen so far, there's no difference between him and Urigidi, certainly. I think him and Telge, as we spoke about, both look composed, look decent positionally, big strong lads, good in the air. I think Welsh has been a standout. I think he's been really strong. But again, if it hadn't been for sort of disastrous injuries, would he even have got in? And imagine a player who could, I mean, what age is he now, 21?
21, yes.
21. Imagine he'd have been playing in the team for the past 2 seasons, the player we could have. But would you have risked it? You'd get laughed in the face. So there's a contradiction in terms of what people want with Celtic, and it's Celtic need to pick a lane, essentially, and decide.
You know the point you make there about Welsh, I think it's a good one, because for years there, JP, let's be honest, during the 9 in a row, it's not as though at the end of every season it was neck and neck and there was a helicopter Sunday or any of that kind of stuff, right? Obviously, it came to home to roost in season number 10, where we just completely capitulated. But there were certain seasons where, that it became pretty clear at a stage that Celtic were far and away stronger than anybody else in Scottish football, and we were going to win the league. So it always frustrates me that it's a tough balance. Of course it is, because Celtic need to win every game. But it does frustrate me that when you're winning at a canter, and if you're winning 4 trebles in a row, for example, that we didn't introduce more of the youth players, especially when you see in just these 3 games the kind of talent Celtic have got bubbling under the surface. And I'm sure that would have been the same 4 years ago with a different set of players, or 5 years ago, because like what you say, JP, Celtic have always had that power, when they're going to try and attract young players to come and sign for Celtic. So it's a big frustration for me. You wonder how many of the players we've lost. Obviously quite a few of them in the last 2-3 seasons have gone elsewhere before they've kicked the ball for Celtic's first team. And I hope that we can buck that trend. But it's a fine balance of introducing the youth, but also ensuring success, because we want to win the league and we want to win it this season. Another player, JP, that I think has impressed has been Adam Montgomery. He's left back. He's also played on the wing over the last 3 games. I think he's looked very impressive. But here's a point. I said earlier, Ewan Henderson's 21. Stephen Welsh is 21. And Anthony Ralston is 22. Now, we're going into this game in 5 days' time. He was another one that was holding his hamstring as he went off last night. He's not been reported as an injury. I think he's probably in the same bracket as a Yeti, where he's maybe had a wee strain, but nothing too much to worry about. He still is our first choice right back as we sit here with 5 days to go, JP. I'm not going to give him a roasting, because I don't think that's necessary. I think he's a very good professional. I think that defensively he's pretty solid, to be honest with you, but I think he's limited when it comes to the point that Ange Postecoglou seems to want his 2 full-backs to push up, his 2 centre-halves to go wide, the goalkeeper to push up, Sorrell to drop back, and that means that both Taylor, if he's playing left-back, and Ralston, if he's playing right-back, have to be good going forward. They have to have better distribution. Now, I know that Ralston has set up a goal in pre-season, but I still have major concerns about him. But I also have big concerns about Taylor when it comes to getting that ball past the man, getting the ball in the box. So we're going back, JP, to that thing where I like what I'm seeing in terms of the shape of it and the master plan, the game plan. I just don't think we've got the fullbacks and in various other parts of the park, the players to fit that system. Now, the fullback situation, really, we should never get to the stage where we've got Taylor and his backup is either Montgomery, who's only played 2 first-team games competitively, or Bolingoli. On the right-hand side of the park, we have Ralston plus Leo Connor, who's never kicked a ball for Celtic in a competitive match. Now, are they priorities for you, or are you more along the lines of Carl Starfelt, who we believe will be the next signing for Celtic? Let's shore up the centre-half area and we can come back to the full-backs. How far can we run with Taylor at left-back and with Ralston at right back?
I mean, not very. I don't want to be disrespectful to Anthony Ralston. He's a professional football player that plays for the club that I've supported all my life. So he's doing a lot more than me right now in terms of Celtic. But I'm sitting here talking about him playing for Celtic on a podcast. So, I think some of the takes from people have been pretty snide, from folk about him. He's been given a contract. He didn't go begging for a contract. He was given a contract. It's not as if it's exactly the same with anything. I mean, that was given to him, and good luck to him. I just don't think that he's at the level that a lot of us would hope our right back would be at the top level. And I'm sure he'd be the first to admit that. He knows he's not Cafu. Do you know what I mean? He's not played the level of games in the last 4 or 5 years that someone at his age should have if he is that good, And I don't think you can go flinging it at managers because, Brendan Rodgers didn't play him consistently. Brendan Rodgers arguably gave him the contract initially, but then obviously didn't play him as a consistent starter. Taylor, on the other hand, I think he has shortfalls as well. I think, so I read Dominic Diamond tweeting about him saying that he's like, this isn't a popular opinion, but I really like Greg Taylor. And I read the replies and there was a lot of people sort of supporting that. Greg Taylor is a Scottish international player. Yes, he's not the regular left back because he's got hell of a competition in front of him. But he's there or thereabouts. He's in the squad. He seems like a good professional as well. Does he have limitations crossing the ball and beating a man? Yes, he does. So if we want to have someone that fits Postecoglou's system better, then yes, we need to spend money in that area. And I said that last season as well. I wasn't a fan of Frimpong, and I wasn't a fan of Laxalt either. I didn't think that they were the type of players that we should be calling first team players at Celtic, because they're just a bit too lightweight and a bit too. You just could see them getting bounced off the ball by more powerful players, and there's nothing worse than seeing a player getting bounced off the ball by a more powerful player, especially if they're wearing a blue shirt. So I don't want to see that again.
No, you're right. And I remember the comments being made by Martin O'Neill when he came in, because he said that this team has been bullied. It's been bullied for far too long, and you just have to look at the athletic stature of the physical stature of some of the guys he brought in to realise that he wasn't willing to take it any longer either, JP. Some great comments coming through on the comment section on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. I'm not forgetting about you. We'll get onto it as soon as possible. And but when we're looking at the current setup at Celtic and the fact that we've just brought in Leo Abada, I'm not sitting here being negative. I think that's brilliant. What I did see quite a bit of, and we refer to social media because, let's be honest, you can get quite a good gauge of how a section of Celtic fans are feeling by checking the social media kind of response when a player is announced. There was a wee bit that I noticed after the announcement, Brian, that he looks like a project player, and I think maybe that was down to the fact that he's only 19 years of age, and we have signed a lot of players around about that bracket in terms of transfer fee in the past who it showed were project players who didn't play a lot of games. Kouassi's come to mind at the moment as well, looking at Kouassi. So here's a player here, he's 19, he's a full internationalist with Israel. Interestingly, he's won 48 caps at underage level, which is a phenomenal amount from under 15s up. And the fee is in the region of £3.5 million. He can play right wing or as striker. You look at his appearances, 76 apps, 20 goals and 10 assists. I know in terms of analytics that is the base level that you can go to. But where does it leave? I think the question I would ask is, where does it leave Karamoko? Because I think this is a make or break season for Dembele. He's been in and around the first team for a couple of years now. Made his debut when he was 16. We've been raving about him, we've been hearing about him. There's been this kind of buzz around Dembele since he was about 13 years of age. There was a tug of war between England and Scotland. Who's going to cap him first? He was one of the hottest prospects in Europe, popping up in all the credible European lists of hot prospects. Yet, it seems as though his development was stumped, certainly in the last 12 to 18 months, Brian. But we've brought in a player at 19, only a year older than Dembele, by the way. We brought in a player who I think isn't a project. I think he's going to be a first-team player, but we still have Forrest to come back. We've got a couple of other players who can play in that position, but I thought Dembele, this was the season for him to make an impact.
I think it still will be. I think if you look at the sort of system that Ange seems to be playing, the only players that play like wingers are his fullbacks. So, because it seems to be like, even with Johnston and Dembele last night, they were pulling in and they're always going to the striker's position, and the striker was almost dropping back at points. So actually, I think that say you get Dembele, Forrest, Abda, they'll all be interchangeable anyway across that. So I think that variety will be okay. I'm not especially concerned that because he's in, it means Dembele's out. But again, it goes back to the point. So you're talking about him being only a year older than Dembele.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. But again, he's played a lot of football.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. Whereas a guy like Urigidi's played, and I feel like I'm always kicking his head in, and I don't mean to, but he's only played like 20 games for a side that get relegated. So that's the difference. And if you look at, say, if we saw a wee guy like Moffat playing for Hibs, or Dane Murray was playing for St Johnstone or something like that,
mm-hmm.
you'd want to sign him. You'd be saying, "Oh, we should be signing that boy for £3 million." The way we've done with Josh George. Is Josh George any better than Montgomery? I don't know. I'm not sure. Is he better?
It's a good shout. Yeah, it's a good shout.
We're paying nearly £4 million for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's that. We talked about an external snobbery with Ange coming in. I think there's an internal snobbery about the players we're bringing through.
Mm-hmm.
But back to your point about the Dembele, I think it is make or break for him. You could question it, apparently, because he wasn't sure if he was signing a new contract. Lennon absolutely binned him, and that's why he was getting played last year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, imagine he had played last year. Imagine a player with his ability with a full year's worth of experience, even in that sort of team. So, again, it all comes back to that balance, doesn't it? But what I would say is the new lad coming in looks like a first team player. I think with the level of experience and stuff. And I think there'll be times where he's a wee bit inconsistent and stuff, which you expect. But I don't see that as a project signing traditionally the way we normally do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's a good point when you look at the age of him compared to Dembele. Dembele's played 8 competitive games, JP. Our new signing's played 76 at this stage, and he's obviously won a big move to Celtic on the back of that. I think at this stage we could probably bracket Marian Shved in the same category as Bayo and Klamala. There will be a move at some point and he will leave the building. Is it then maybe a case, JP, that we're bringing in Abada as a replacement for Ryan Christie? Is he more of a Ryan Christie type player that he can play in the centre? We've played Christie wide right quite a bit, and he did effectively come in on his left foot. We've seen it twice in the Scottish Cup games against Aberdeen and Hearts last season. But is he more of that type of player? Is he in to replace Christie, do you think?
Do you know what? I've deliberately not watched any YouTube highlight reels of this guy because I want to judge him what he does in a Celtic jersey. Because see the amount of times you see these YouTube reels, and then it's like, I'm trying to think of a Kevin Graham analogy. It's like, I don't know, buying a new TV and getting it home and it's black and white or something like that. Do you know? It's just, there's so many times that we've had these guys coming in, everybody gets excited about them, everybody shares the links, and then you either don't see them for about 6 months, and then when you do see them, they get 20 minutes against, I don't know, East Fife in the Cup, and then they disappear again, and then they come back, and then people are like, what's happened to that guy? And you're like, oh, we've just seen this story so many times. And I put up last week when Bayo left, I just said, right, 9 appearances, 9, what was it? What was his stats again? Was it something like 9 appearances, 2 goals, a £2 million fee, God knows how many wages? And I just basically said, please, Celtic, stop doing this. Stop making people rich, and we're getting nothing in return. And you could turn around and say, oh, well, it's not the player's fault. It's the club's fault. The club has to get the scouting right on the head, and even more so now. So this guy that's come in, I obviously want him to do well. Of course I do, because he's wearing a Celtic strip. I don't care where he's from. I'm not going to get into the whole Israeli-Palestine thing. It's not about that. It's about what he can do in a football shirt on the pitch for Celtic. And if we're not sitting here, if I'm still sitting here in a year's time and he's not played 30, 40 games or 20, 30 games, whatever, and contributed to Celtic, then the rot continues, and we just keep wasting money and flinging it against the wall when we should be so far out of sight. I was speaking to a Rangers fan at work, and he was like, your recruitment's cost you all this. Your recruitment has cost, and the guy's not a clown. He's a decent enough person to speak to, and he's like, your recruitment cost you 10 in a row. Bad recruitment. And it's right. It's true.
No, he is. He's spot on with that. I'm going to dip into some of the comments coming through. If you are watching on YouTube, then remember to subscribe, because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will be entered into a free prize draw every single month whilst you're a subscriber, for great prizes such as a platinum disc for the Verve's Urban Hymns. JP, talk to us. You are
Got it there.
a massive fan of music. I was a huge Verve fan, got to say, massive fan, still listening to them to this day. A lot of people reckon that Urban Hymns is their second or third best album. It's obviously got all the big hits in it. I thought they were a tremendous band. Any experiences of seeing them live, JP Mason?
Yeah. Saw them when they reformed and played the Friday. I think it was it might have been the first ever Friday at T in the Park, when T in the Park used to be Saturday, Sunday, but then they did a Friday. I might be wrong on that, but they definitely played the Friday night, and I went to see them, and they were amazing, and I was right down the front. And then I also saw Richard Ashcroft solo at Latitude Festival in the Six Music tent. Just him, acoustic guitar, playing all the songs you want to hear, and it was. I just went in thinking this might be good. It ended up being the highlight of the weekend by some margin. I mean, Urban Hymns is. A lot of folk, the snobby folk, or the people that like to be cool, go, oh no, what do you call it? Northern
Storm in
Soul.
Heaven or Northern Soul.
Northern Soul's better, and Northern Soul is great because it's got This Is Music on it, and history and stuff like that. But Urban Hymns, just for capturing a moment in time. I just remember first year at uni, and that was the album. That and Be Here Now. Those two records were the ones that, and This Is Hardcore by Pulp as well. Got to put a mention in there for that. So
I was more different class, I've got to say, a couple of years before. I did see them at Leeds, and by that point McCabe had left, and it was Pino Palladino playing lead. They were still outstanding. They were tremendous. I think he played guitar for Paul Young, JP, if we really want to go to Celtic Da territory. But let's get back to David Bradley, who is saying once again, it's the late show by Celtic. Play it again, Sam. Yeah, absolutely. Brian Murphy comes in. What's with the negative headline? Yeah, we know we need new players, but let's just get behind the team now with positive energy. Well, we are behind the team, Brian, 100% behind the team, but it's almost like Groundhog Day when it comes to recruitment. And it goes back to the point JP's just made there. Brian, the recruitment or lack of has cost us a hell of a lot. I think that, it was almost as if the success masked a million deficiencies before as well, because we were buying a lot of duds. And I hear the argument, but every club goes through that. I seen that argument actually after JP tweeted about Bio. Every big club, there's no science behind signing players. But I just think that when it comes to Celtic, we've been particularly bad at it. And I also think that when we're looking at the new signing of Abada, we can't afford now to spend 3.5 or 3.6 million on a project. But I'm going to ask you the question, is the next one in the door, according to Fabrizio Romano, is Carl Starfelt? And if so, do you believe that he is going to be Chris Ayer's replacement?
I would expect so, yeah. I think Celtic's transfer fee is a bit like Ryan Christie's shooting. I feel like if you shoot 30 times on goal, you're probably going to score 2 screamers.
That's a good analogy. I like that. Well done.
I feel like with Celtic, we just sign Andy and hope a couple of them are good. I think, Starfield coming in should get a bit of experience. I said last night, add a bit of good looks to the back line. We've been solely missing that for a couple of years, a good look to at the back. But yeah, transfers is a funny one. I think what's important to remember though, and I just want to touch on that comment about the negativity. So far on the 38 minutes we've been on, we've spoken about how the players are fitting into the system. There's so much youth to look forward to. We really like Ange. Very positive things. There is a tendency to focus on the negative in life. Focus on the positive, just as a wee life lesson there. But the other thing I want to say is there's almost a separation of Ange and the football club now. Because although Ange has come in and he's got new ideas and a new influx, and so is Don Mackay, it is still the exact same structure with the same personnel as last year. So the transfers were never going to dramatically change this year. Mm-hmm. I said a while ago, and I get kind of slaughtered for it, but I said I think this is a year, my expectations for this year are very low, because I think it has to take at least a season to change the scouting, to change the recruitment, to change the backroom staff, to get the players up to speed, to get the new players buried in, to have a real success. So, and that was always going to take time. So if at any point we're being a bit negative, it's because we're still negative about the way the club's been run and about the situation we find ourselves in, which is the club's doing. No Don Mackay's and no Angie's, because they've always had the benefit of the doubt. So I just think it's an important distinction to make moving forward.
Yeah, it is. And I also think that, whilst on the subject of that, it's got to be clear what we are doing here at Celtic State of Mind. after 4 years or so of asking and trying to get access to the club, not just for press conferences, but for other means as well, for interviews, because we don't just plan to be doing topical discussions on live broadcasts. ACSOM was set up initially as an audio podcast that was interview based. We very rarely covered games. It was all about getting people in with a Celtic state of mind, be that James Allen, the lead singer of Las Vegas, or Neil Lennon, who at that point was the ex-manager and was managing Hibs. That was where we started. Once we got into lockdown, we decided let's go out every single day. Partly because we wanted to grow the channel, but also because we're giving content to Celtic fans on a daily basis, and that's going to continue. But there's also other big plans for a Celtic state of mind, big, fully produced, recorded shows that are going to give you something that you would otherwise expect to see on a mainstream channel. That's how well produced these shows are going to be. But on a daily basis, the ACSOM Bulletin goes out, and what you're going to get there is that we'll discuss everything. I mean, we are going to be discussing Peter Lawwell at some stage in today's show. We are going to be discussing the Griffiths situation at some point today. We're going to be talking about the release of football jerseys. As much as people say, get a life, imagine talking about a Celtic jersey. We talk about everything Celtic related, and some of that, unfortunately, in the last 12 to 18 months has been fairly negative. So the narrative isn't something that we influence. We just talk about it because it involves Celtic. And hopefully from that we look as much as possible for the positives within the situation that we find ourselves in. One thing I will say is there's a point coming in here once again from YouTube. Powerman 1988, that was a good year for Celtic. Johnson is not Celtic class, get him sold. I've noticed, JP, Mikey Johnson does divide opinion amongst Celtic supporters. 22 years of age now, same age as Anthony Ralston, been in and around the Celtic squad for a while. We know his talent. Celtic players apparently reckon that he is the most skillful player at the club. But he's injured again, and he lasted 20 odd minutes last night. And there comes a point, and I always go back to the point in Ryan Christie's career, where there was obviously a light bulb moment, JP, where he decided that he was going to dedicate himself to becoming physically a completely different proposition. And I think that actually happened partly when he was up at Aberdeen. He came back as a completely different player. And then he burst back onto the scene at a time where, had Ryan Christie gone to Aberdeen for £500,000 or whatever at that time, I don't think Celtic fans would have been too disappointed, because he hadn't shown enough in a Celtic jersey that we would have thought he would have become the player that he became. I know his form dipped over the last year or so, but Mikey Johnson, I think there has to come a point in his career where he's 22 now and he seems lightweight, and he needs to become more of a physical player. Is that beyond him? Because it just seems to me that he's constantly injured. Now, one thing that crossed my mind last night, JP, was perhaps the high tempo, which has been reintroduced to Celtic's play, and you can see it, is why we're getting niggles here and there. Muscle injuries, for example. You can get that. But regardless of who he's playing under, Mikey Johnson always seems injured.
Yeah, he seems to be unfortunate. I think getting played up front at Ibrox that time hasn't done him any favours in the eyes of a lot of fans, probably just because they, and I think that's unfair, because obviously that's not his position, and he was kind of thrown in at the deep end on that front. But I do like him. I think he's like you say, is if players say he's skillful, I mean, we can see that he's skillful and he can beat a man. There's no doubt about that. The injury consistency is a bit of a concern. He is a bit of a kind of glass ankles player, he's just, there's not much of him. So, if you go in hard at him, it was like Dembele last night. I'm sure other players could probably maybe have, shrugged that off or rode that challenge a bit better than him. But I mean, he's not really made of steel, is he? I mean, and that guy just absolutely halved him. And he looked like a wee boy going down against an adult male. And Mikey Johnston's kind of built in a similar stature, so you just wonder if he can play at this level consistently. I don't know. We've never ever seen him have a run of 20 or 30 games, have we? He's never really been in the team for a sustained period of time. Possibly a loan move would be an idea. Would it be something he'd entertain? I don't know. But maybe when Christie was at Aberdeen, he kind of looked around and thought, is this where I want to be? No disrespect to Aberdeen, but maybe he looked around and thought, is this where I want to be? No, I want to make it at Celtic. And when I get back there, I'll kick on and I'll do something. Because I remember when he was at Aberdeen, my friend James from the SAD, he's an Aberdeen fan. I remember speaking to him and thinking, Christie would be a great signing for you if you got him permanently. And I don't remember saying, I really, really want him back or anything like that. I just remember thinking, well, if he does well at Aberdeen, then it's good for Scotland, and it's good for the player. But then he comes back and they did kick on. So maybe Johnston, it would benefit him, but it's up to the player, isn't it?
See the thing with Christie there, now that we're on the subject, is the actual asset, Brian. When you look at the drop in valuation, we know that obviously that's happened globally and in football terms as well. But I mean, if we do sell him, what are we talking on a transfer fee for Ryan Christie at this moment in time? What ballpark would you expect to get for Ryan Christie? I know it'll come through as an undisclosed fee, but I mean, his value has dropped dramatically in the last 12 to 18 months, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, as has his contract length, because I think he's only got 6 months left. Mm-hmm. So if I'm being honest, probably nothing, because I think most teams would just hold up to January and get him for free, because you're not going to shell out 4 million, 5 million from him when he's 6 months left in his contract and you can hang on. I think if we'd have sold him last season at this time, I think you could have got a really decent figure from him, because he was coming off back of a decent season, decent age, good ability. There's a lot of teams interested. But just if you look at the reality of it, and it's not a judgment on the player, but 6 months left in your contract, people just hang off for that. It's slightly different with Edward than Ayer, because they've still got the year. Mm-hmm. So you find that, well, do you know what, let's get them in there out, so we've got a full season on at them. But yeah, I generally don't see him going until the summer.
Now,
the January window, Christmas.
Ewan Johnston saw the Verve as it would have been back then, at a gig under Kingston Bridge around 93, 94, Oasis supporting, who I missed. Might have been original Cat House, brilliant. Yeah, great memories of Amazing. Verve and the Verve. There was a quote, or a comment rather, came up, and I can't find it, but it was talking about Dembele's attitude, and that might have played a part in him dropping out of the first team kind of scene last season. I do know that he was offered an opportunity to get out and play some football, and he refused because it would have been at Queen's Park in the 4th tier of Scottish football, and he refused that. And his argument was that some of his contemporaries are getting big moves to teams like Bayern Munich, and he didn't see that as being a development move for him. Is that a bad attitude, or is that a kid who knows that it may not have developed him? I don't know. I guess that's up for you to give your opinion on. But to be honest with you, if we can get a bit of what Dembele has promised since he was 13-year-old this season, I'll be chuffed, because I just don't want Celtic to be losing talent that could go away and prove themselves elsewhere. And I think Dembele still has that ability to do that. 2 massive talking points, JP, in the world of Celtic. First of all, we touched on it last night briefly, Brian and I, on the post-match. Peter Lawwell is very much still at Celtic. Is that a big surprise to you, JP?
Not really, no. I mean, it'd be quite hard to let go of something that you've been part of for so long, especially when, whether you believe it or not, he is a Celtic fan, and I believe that he's a Celtic fan. I don't believe that he's made the right decisions in recent times that have helped Celtic. You can point to the 4 trebles, you can point to various other things, successes in the transfer market and things like that, but there's a lot of things that I question why those things have happened. So him being at the club still, I know that it's to do with, is it the European committee, some sort of committee that he has to sit on, or he has to remain part of Celtic to be allowed to sit in that committee or something like that. I don't really care, as long as Dominic Mackay is the man making the decisions, because you don't want somebody meddling in your affairs. Like if I in my job, and somebody was coming along to me and telling me what to do or whatever, I don't think I would really relish that. But I think Dominic Mackay seems to be pretty honest with what he said so far, and he's at the end of a phone if I need to ask him anything. But a job of that level, are we really led to believe that Lawwell is some sort of puppet master and Dominic Mackay is just on strings doing what he says? I really don't think that's. I mean, maybe people will come firing in the comments going, of course that's what's happening, JP, stop being so naive. But I don't think at that level that is the case. Surely when you're the CEO of a major organisation, you're not, zipped up the back and being, controlled by somebody that used to do the job before you. Because I don't know, maybe I'm being naive, I don't know.
I don't think you are. It's one of these subjects, JP, some people will completely disagree with what you just said, but I've got to say I'm on your boat when it comes to this, and I think that the board that he is a member of, the board that he's on is European Club Association board, and in order to hold a place on that board, you need to have an association, you need to hold a position with a European football club. So I would ask myself, well, does that benefit Celtic? Because these are the things that I always come back to, the basics. If it benefits Celtic in terms of us having someone on that board, then I'm all for it. Then they say, yeah, but Peter Lawwell, he's an overbearing figure, he casts a heavy shadow, etc. But Brian made the point last night, Brian, I'll come to you in a second, where you said, Don Mackay's no mug. You don't get to this position, you don't get to the position that he gave up to come to Celtic by being someone else's puppet.
Yeah, correct. There's absolutely zero chance he's got where he is in business by being told what to do. And I think, as we sort of mentioned last night, just in summary, this sort of story's broke as if it's a major thing. And I think the mainstream media, what they should have done was paid attention. When they watched the fan conference, instead of listening to just one stupid question by a stupid person, if they listened to the rest of the questions, they would have heard Don Mackay saying, Peter Lawwell's here, he's going to be here for a while, he's part of this board. Mm-hmm. So the lesson there is mainstream media, pay attention. But, I think it's really interesting with Peter Lawwell. It reminds me of Citizen Kane, and that he's, he assembled, all this wealth and fame, and, but his ego made him create the Xanadu, and he disappeared in it alone. And I feel like Peter Lawwell, do you imagine? Look at the perspective of him. Everyone's saying, oh, Lawwell, I hate him, get him out. Look at Brendan Rodgers, he's a rat. Now imagine they'd both checked their ego and got on. Imagine the conversation we'd be having about they two. They'd both be heroes forever. So I think Lawwell's always going to go down. It's like a movie star. You're only as good as your last performance, and Lawwell's only as good as his last memory of him being a CEO. And people forget how much good he's done for the club and how good a shrewd a businessman he has been. And listen, some of the transfer deals he's been involved in have been shambolic, but he's also made the club a lot of money, made it very financially secure. So there has to, when you're talking about law, you have to look at it with a degree of objectivity. Mm-hmm. But again, just to get back to your original question, there's no chance that Don Mackay is getting told what to do off anyone. You don't get to that position in Scottish rugby, Scottish football, whatever, by being a puppet. No chance. No,
absolutely. And another big talking point, JP, is that of our erstwhile striker, Lee Griffiths. We need to talk about Lee once again, and it's for non-football matters. Yes, we know that there was no criminality in the latest misdemeanour, but a misdemeanour it was nonetheless. Last season, this time, he was left out of the squad that travelled to France for pre-season. This time round, he's sent home from the Welsh training camp. That's 2 pre-seasons on the bounce, all down to himself, it's got to be said, no one else. What do you do with him?
I honestly, I'm kind of at the point where, and I said this the other week, because it's affecting Celtic. This is costing Celtic a player who has been signed on a year's deal. So he's a first team player. He should be available for selection. And is he going to be available for selection for next Tuesday? Probably not. And it's just embarrassing that Postecoglou had to say, I've not really given it any thought. when he was asked the question, I've not really given it any thought. And it's just like, why are you giving the manager a problem here? This guy has got enough on his plate without, crap like this, and you're giving him a headache that he could have completely done without. Even if he doesn't think you're the greatest player in the world, you were still going to be considered for selection. You would have thought, given his experience and given the age of the kids that they're putting in the team, if Lee Griffiths has been given a contract, then you'd like to think that he's going to be considered a possible player in these games coming up, in the Michelin games. And now it looks like he's not going to be. And again, like you said, it's all of his own doing. It's not, it's not a witch hunt. That he did something that caused this to happen, and it caused him to be sent home and to be investigated and everything else. So it's not as if someone stitched him up or anything else. It's just this is the reality of a situation that it's his own doing. And it's just more and more, finger pointing at the club and dragging up stuff from the past about the club and another stick to beat us with. And it's just unsavoury. Whether it's illegal or criminal or not, it's unsavoury, and it's disappointing.
Well, this is the thing, JP, right? So people might say, right, it's not a criminal matter. Yes, that's right. But to get to that point, I'm not saying that's right, I'm saying that it's been decided it's not a criminal matter. To get to that point, there is a level of investigation by the police to decide that this is not a police matter. No further police action will be taken in that matter. So there has been a police investigation to get to that point, because the police work alongside an authority, which means that you can't just write off any old complaint. There's a set of criteria that needs to be fulfilled before you decide that there's no further police action. So there has been a level of police investigation to get to that stage. Lee Griffiths' behaviour and his actions have brought the club to a point where one of our players has been investigated by the police. And that's the facts of the matter. Yes, it was decided that it was not a criminal matter and no further police action would be necessary. But that investigation, for me, has already brought disrepute to the name of Celtic Football Club. Now, the fact that Ange Postecoglou is being asked post-match, of course he's going to be asked, is bad enough. The fact that Ajeti pulls up with a slight strain, and I'm hoping it's a precaution that he was taken off. We didn't have a striker at that stage. Owen Moffat is not a striker, he's a winger. He actually looked out of position when he played up front, and I don't like doing that to any player, because that's what happens if you play Mikey Johnston centre forward against Rangers, JP, or and we've done it before. We've done it with Lewis Morgan in the cup final. We played him up front. He looked like, he didn't know what he was doing. He's out of position. There's nothing worse for a footballer to be playing out of position. Thankfully, it was just against Bristol City. It was just a pre-season friendly, and it won't affect Moffat's career, who, by the way, gets called the Denny Deco, which I think is tremendous, because, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that kid, because I think he was very impressive in the minutes that I did see him performing. But we are at that stage where, very quickly we've gone from having, I think, 5 strikers on the books of various qualities: Edouard, Griffiths, Ajeti, Klimala and Bayo. Bayo and Klimala have left the club. Even decisions like that are being made on the basis that you have a player you've just given a new contract to, Brian. So he's let the gaffer down, he's let the club down at all these different levels. And I remember saying quite early on last season, probably when he was putting up social media posts about his fitness, it was almost like 2 fingers up to you, Lenny, user in France, but I'm fit kind of thing. Get him off social media, because it's doing him no favours. A lot of his troubles emanate from the platforms that he's using on social media. But, as soon as he gets an opportunity in that period where he's just about to sign a new contract or not, he's out doing open goal. He's on the this morning kind of Euro programme where obviously he's talking about Neil Lennon. You've got to look at that and think he just attracts trouble wherever he goes. I mean, see, in 2 years' time, where will Lee Griffiths be in terms of his football career? Because I'm thinking Anthony Stokes. Yeah,
it's looking like it's going that way. I advocated for him to get another contract purely based on the fact we had so limited squad numbers. I thought it made sense to keep him at the club. I thought, it would be an asset coming off the bench. So based with that in mind, what he's then done is negated that by being unavailable again. and he's put the club in a position where we're still short again, even though he's been given a contract. And that's purely from his behaviour. Now, he's all the man he's ever going to be. He's a father of what? 4? He's nearly 5. He's nearly 30 years old, if not 30. What does he have to do? When is he going to learn? The reality is he's not going to learn. And at some point, you have to say, do you know what? You're not helping us now anyway because you were signed to give us, support up front. You're now not doing it because of your behaviour. That's it. So yeah, of course it wasn't a criminal act, but it doesn't make it right. It's still a wrong act. It's still as an ambassador or a player for the club, he's acted completely inappropriately. Mm-hmm. He's not served the club. He's not served Ange. He's not helped his players out. And I just think, I don't know if the club will sack him or if they'll keep him or, what they'll do. But for me, it's going to take a lot for me to be comfortable with Lee Griffiths back at the club again. And I was a supporter of him.
Yeah, big time. So was I. Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Listen, it's been brilliant teaming you two guys up on a Thursday Bulletin. Welcome back, JP. Always a pleasure. Didn't even ask you about your Italian jersey over your right shoulder, but I think it says it all. I used to love the AC Milan jerseys.
Oh, me too. I went to the San Siro when I was 20 and saw them against Udinese, and that's the strip from that time. Shevchenko, Bierhoff, Leonardo, all those guys. And
Leonardo, then, what a player he was, eh?
Yeah, he was. And then I went to the Champions League game in 2013 in San Siro when Celtic played there, and we got beat right at the death. I think Balotelli, maybe. I can't.
Where's he now anyway? Is he available?
But Anthony Stokes hit the crossbar with a free kick, and then they went up the park and scored. And my love of AC Milan slightly waned at that point because we were right up the top of the stand and sort of caged off like a weight, kind of like you are at the Nou Camp. And the fans in front of us turned round and had a Gattuso banner where it was like a Rangers Milan Gattuso banner, and I was like, oh no. I can't have that. I think so. Milan wavered a little bit as my Italian team at that point, but I mean, I'll always love the 90s Milan teams were unbelievable. Rijkaard and Van Basten, Hullet,
incredible,
and all that. Yeah,
and so stylish.
Baresi. So yeah, so that's just a wee nod to what happened on Sunday.
You talk about stats. I'd love one of the tremendous statos who work within the Celtic sphere, and of course we occasionally have Alan Morrison on the show to talk to us about Baresi and Maldini, because their stats must have been off the scale. Unbelievable. A nice wee throwback there, JP. This time next week we will be talking about that game you've been counting down for probably 115 days now, because it will have been and gone, and we can talk about the win, the loss or the draw. Thanks everybody for getting involved on the socials, on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. If you're on YouTube, remember, get subscribing. We're giving away loads of signed items, not just Verve Platinum discs and things like that, but also loads of signed Celtic stuff involving players such as Danny McGrain and Bertiold and others, Bobby Lennox as well.
A signed Boise ACSOM strip. That's what I want.
Possibly. That is where, hey, listen, that is where it's going to go, massive. We're sitting at 12.7. That will burst the seams, I'm sure. So thanks everybody for getting involved. Thanks Brian Degning and also JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers.